Welcome to part 3 and the final part of this Blender tutorial series where we are creating this summer beverage. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2 of this tutorial series, then definitely check that out. I will have a link in the description to the tutorial playlist. So this is where we left off in part 2, so in this part we are going to be finishing up the entire scene. So to start off with this part, I'm going to be adding a texture to this glass to make it look like there's some water on the glass. So I am in the shading workspace, so I have the 3D view right here, and then I have the shader editor right here. I'm also going to go into the rendered view by holding down the Z key and moving my mouse up into the rendered view, so we can preview how that's looking. So what I'm going to do now is press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for an image texture. So let's just click on the image texture and drop it here, and then I'm going to click on Open to open up the image. And then I'm going to be adding in the surface imperfection texture that I talked about in part 1 of the tutorial series. So again, links in the description if you'd like to download the free surface imperfection texture. So it's a free texture from a website called Ambient CG. So I downloaded the 4K JPEG version of the texture, and once you download the texture, you can just extract the zip file and then go inside the folder. And when you go inside the folder, there's going to be a few different maps, and the one I want to use is the VAR1. So this one is the one that is mostly black, but then it has a little bit of white. So I'm just going to double click on this to open it up. Now what I want to do is I want to take this color here and I want to put it into the roughness, because I want this map here to control the roughness to make it look like there's little bits of water droplets. And then because this texture isn't actually contributing to the base color, right here on the color space, I need to set this to the non-color. And then we turned on the node wrangler earlier in the tutorial series, so what I'm going to do is just select this surface imperfections, just make sure you have that texture selected, and I'm going to press Ctrl T, and that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. So instead of using the UVs, I instead want to use the object coordinates. So I'm going to plug the object into the vector, and that way it's going to use the object coordinates. And then the mapping can go into the vector of the surface imperfections. Now you can see that that doesn't look very good, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the flat here, and I'm instead going to change this to a box, and that way it's going to place the texture more evenly around the object. And then if I Control Shift and select the surface imperfections, we can see how that's looking. Now I want to blend the edges because there are some seams here and there, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn the blend value to just like a value of 0.2. So that's just going to nicely place the texture on the object. Now you can see that the texture is tiling a lot and it's way too small. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the scale values. So right here on this mapping node, right here on the scale, you can click and then drag down, and then you can hold down the Shift key and you can drag back and forth, and that's going to change the scale. So I'm going to make it a bit smaller. So just a scale like that, that is pretty good. So I'm going to now Control Shift and select the glass BSDF shader again. And if you zoom in there, you can see we now have some nice roughness there along the glass, and it looks like it's cold and it looks like there is water on the glass. Now I want to be able to control that roughness a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a color ramp node. Let's click on the color ramp, and I'm going to drop it right in here between the image texture and the glass shader. So we can now play around with these colors, and it's going to change how rough it is. So I'm going to click on this white tab, and I'm going to drag the white tab over, just drag it over, and then the white color, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to make it a bit darker. And if I make it darker, you can see that now we're not able to see that texture very well, but if I turn it up to a lighter color, now you're able to see it really well. So I don't want to be able to see it that clearly because that's really strong, so I'm just going to make it a little bit of a darker color so you're not able to see it quite as much, but I still do want to be able to see it. So maybe just something like that is pretty good. Let's press Ctrl S again to save, and then I'm going to go back to the layout. So now what I want to do is I want to actually create some little water droplet models, and we're going to be using geometry nodes to put the water droplets on the glass. So I'm going to hold down the Shift and S button, and then I'm going to move my mouse over to the cursor to world origin and then let go of the Shift and S button. And that's just going to ensure that the 3D cursor is in the very center there of the 3D scene. That way I can press Shift A and I can go here to mesh, mesh, and I'm going to add an icosphere. And when I add the icosphere is going to be added right there where the 3D cursor is. And if you click right next to me on the add icosphere settings and open this up, I'm just going to leave the subdivisions at the default, which is 2. And so this object here is going to be the little water droplets. So I'm going to press G to grab, and I'm going to move this down here because I actually just want to move it kind of down here underneath the scene so we can't see it. And then also using the object context menu, I'm just going to shade this object smooth. So I'm going to be making 3 different random shapes of the water droplets just to make a little bit of variation. So I'm going to press Shift D. Shift D will duplicate this, and I'm going to bring it over here. And then I'm going to press the Tab key, and that's going to go into edit mode. Now I want to just kind of play around with the shape. So what I'm going to do is press the O key, or you can also click right there, and that's going to turn on the proportional editing. So I can now just select some of these vertices, and I can press G to grab, and then it's going to pull along the vertices with it because the proportional editing is turned on. But you can see that it's pulling along way too many vertices, so I need to scroll my mouse wheel down, and you can see when I scroll my mouse wheel down, that's going to change the size of the proportional editing circle. So whatever's in the circle, that's what's going to be pulled along with it. So I'm just going to kind of play around with the shape and make it a little bit random, just so that we have a little bit of variation. All right, so something like that is pretty good. So I'm now going to press the Tab key to go back into object mode. And then I want to duplicate this one more time. So with this object selected, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's just stick it here. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to press Tab to go into edit mode. And then I can just select some of the vertices and just kind of move them around. We're just going to make kind of a random lumpy water droplet just to give a bit of variation. So something like that, just something that looks kind of organic and natural. Just kind of move that around. All right, there we go. So we also have 3 different sizes, and that's pretty cool as well. All right, so before we put these on the cup, I want to put them all in their own collection. So I'm going to select the first one, hold down the Shift key, and then Shift and select the other ones. So now to move these into their own collection, I'm going to press the M key, and the M key is going to bring up the move option, and I want to click on New Collection, and I'm going to rename this to just like water. All right, there we go, water, and then click on OK. So now if you open up the outliner, you can see that these objects are in their own collection, and that's going to be very helpful when we are setting up the geometry nodes. So let's do the geometry nodes next. So I'm going to select the cup, and then I want to split the window and add the geometry node editor. So I'm going to hover my mouse right here when the crosshair appears, and I'm going to click and drag this out to split the window. And then right here I can click on this to change the editor type, and I'm going to go right down here and change this to the geometry node editor. Then I can also press the N key to close that side panel. All right, so make sure the glass is selected, and I'm going to click on New. All right, so we now have a geometry nodes. So we're going to be using the geometry nodes to put the water droplets all along the glass. So let's first press Shift A, and then I'm just going to press S, and that's going to take me to the search. And I'm going to search for the distribute points on faces node. I'm just going to click on that and drop it here. And I'm actually going to bring it right down here underneath this. And then I want to take the group input, and I'm going to put that into the mesh here of the distribute points on faces. I'm also going to press Shift A, and then I'll press S to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the instance on points. So here it is, the instance on points. So I'll click on this and drop it down here. And then I want to put the points from the distribute points on faces. I want to plug a wire into the points on the instance on points. And then I can take the instance on points, and we're going to plug that into the geometry. Now it makes the glass disappear, and so I also need to press Shift A. I'll press S to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the join geometry node. Let's add the join geometry, and I'm going to stick it right here, and then I can plug the original geometry back up into the join geometry just to add that back so we can see the glass. All right, so I now need to add the particles, so I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the collection info. Click on the collection info node, and I'm just going to drop it down here. So now to actually see that on the object, I'm going to plug the geometry up to the instance. So we are basically instancing this collection onto the instance on points. So it's going to add this collection onto the geometry. Now we haven't actually told it what collection we want to instance. So on the collection info, let's click right here, and I'm going to add the water. And you can see it's working, there they are, but there's a problem with this. They're way too big, and they're like way over here. So what I need to do to fix this is I need to check mark the separate children, the reset children, and then also the pick instance. And now you can see that it is on the glass. Now it's way too big right now, so on this scale value, let's actually click and then drag down and then let go. And I'm going to change these to like a 0.1, so they're much smaller. So now you can see that really taking effect. Now there's a few things I want to change to this. One thing that I want to do is make them even smaller, and I actually want to give each one like a random size, and then I also want to give them a random rotation as well. And then also I don't want the water droplets to be all over the glass. I just want them to be where the drink is. So we are going to use the weight painting to do that. First though, let's change the size and the rotation. So I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the random value node. Let's drop the random value right here. So I can now take the value and I'm going to put the value into the scale, and that way instead of using one scale value, it's going to use random values. So now we just need to change the minimum value and the maximum value, and it'll be random scales between those values. So on the minimum value right here, I'm going to be using a value of 0.003. So 0.003, and then also right here on the maximum value, 1 is way too big, so I'm going to turn this way down to like a 0.016. So I'm going to use a 0.016, and now you can see that they are much smaller, but if you zoom in there, you can see some of them are bigger and then some of them are smaller. Now I'm going to drag these back a little bit because I want to give this a little bit more space, and I want to take this random value node and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's drop it right here. So I want to plug this second random value into the rotation to give each instance a random rotation. So each of these little pieces here will have a random rotation. Now on the minimum here, I'm just going to turn this to like a 0.1, and then on the maximum here, I can just turn this up to a giant value. I'm just going to turn it up maybe to like 100. And now if I look around here, you can see they all have a random rotation. And then right here on this density, we can turn this density value up, and now you're able to see much more of those droplets. So let's do the weight painting now. So what I'm going to do is just make this a lot smaller. So I'm going to click and drag and make this much smaller. So what I'm going to do is just select this object, and then I'm going to click right here on object mode, and I'm going to go over to the weight painting, and then click right up here on this draw, and I'm just going to turn this to add. So just change this to add, and then I just want to paint where the liquid is inside the glass. So it kind of starts about here. So I'm just going to click and drag, and I need to actually make my brush bigger. So I'm going to just drag this radius value to make my brush bigger, and I can now just kind of go along here, and everywhere where the liquid is inside there, I'm going to make it red. I'm going to go all along here, and then if you want to see this taking effect, we can just set that up now. So I'm going to drag this back over so I can see this. So what I want to do is I want to click on this random right here, and I'm going to instead change this to Poisson disk. And then I want to take the density factor, and I'm going to plug the density factor right up here to this extra slot right there. And when I do that, now right over here, you can see that there is this little button right here. And so I'm going to click on this. This is the input attribute toggle. And when I click on this, now instead of using a number value, we can actually use another value. So I'm going to click right here, and the one that I want to use is the point group. You can see it says float right over here. And this is the weight paint that we are painting. So now if I zoom in here, you can see that there isn't any of those dots where the blue area is, but then there is more of those dots where it is red. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and to see this a bit better, I'm going to turn this density max up even more. I'm going to make it much higher, and I'm going to actually turn this density max to like 175. All right, I'll make this a bit smaller so I can see this better. So I'm now just going to go along and continue to paint, and I'm just going to paint all along here where I want the droplets to be. But then of course right down here at the bottom, there isn't any liquid right inside here because this is solid glass, so we're not going to paint right there, but I am going to paint all the way down just to about there, and it's going to stop right there where the liquid will end. So let's just keep on painting. I'm just going to click and drag and add red values all around here and all around there, and just continue to do that all along the glass. All right, let's just look around, see how that is. That is pretty good. Just kind of fill that in. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you can have some parts which are a little bit different. Like if you want to have a few parts here and there where there's like a few water droplets, or you could also make it a bit darker or a bit more blue in some areas just to kind of make it a bit more random. I think I will do that. So what I'm going to do is actually click right here on this add, and I'm going to instead change this to the subtract brush, and then I'm going to make the radius bigger again. But then I'm going to take the strength value and I'm going to drag the strength value way down so it's much smaller. Then then what I can do is just kind of tap here and there, and you can see that it's going to start to be a bit more yellow, and so there's going to be less water droplets here and there. So it just adds a little bit more randomness. So if you want to do that, you can, just to give a little bit more randomness and make it seem a bit more organic and natural. So something like that. All right, so that is it. So I'm finished now. So I'm going to click on the weight painting, and I'm going to change this back to the object mode. And then I will press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and then I'm going to hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view to preview how that's looking. And just to preview what I can see here, I pressed Control B in the camera view, and this way I can drag a box, and this is going to add a boundary, so it'll render faster. The preview will be faster. Now you can see that all those little dots there, they're all white, and I don't want them to be white. I want to make them look like water. So what I'm going to do is hold down the Z button, go back into solid view, and then we don't actually need the geometry nodes anymore. So I'm going to hover my mouse right here when the crosshair appears, and I can click and then drag over and then let go to close that. All right, so then right down here, I need to add a material to these objects. So what we're going to do is just select one of the objects. I'm going to go right here to the material properties, and then I can click right here on the drop down, and I'm going to add the water material. So this is a water material that we created in part 2 of this tutorial series, and we added it to the water here. So I'm going to click on the next one, and then click on the drop down here, and we're going to add the water, and then click right here, and we're going to click on the drop down, and we're going to add the water. All right, let's press the 0 on the numpad to kind of go into the camera's view. I'll hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view and just see how that's looking. And there we go. So I can just press Control B, drag a box around here, and I can zoom in. So there we go. So now we have all these little water droplets right there on the side, and then we also have that roughness value changing to kind of make it look like there is water on the top of the glass. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back into the solid view, and I'll press Control S again to save. All right, so I'm now going to be adding in the orange, and we're going to put the orange right here behind the glass. And the orange that I'm going to be adding is my procedural orange peel material. So I talked about this in the earlier parts of this tutorial series, but what you can do is you can head over to my procedural orange peel material tutorial, and you can watch that tutorial and learn how to create it yourself. And then once you've created it, we can append it into this Blender file. Or if you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can also purchase the procedural orange peel material. So the links will be in the description where you can purchase it, or you can watch the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is click on File, and then I'm going to go right down here, and I'm going to click on Append. So I'm just going to go into the tutorial files of my procedural orange peel material, and then I'm going to click on the blend file. So now we are inside the blend file, and I want to go right over here to the object folder, go inside the object folder, and then I'm going to select the icosphere because that is the orange. So I'm going to click on the icosphere, and then I will click on Append. All right, so we've brought that in. I'm going to press G to grab, kind of bring it up here, and then I will also press G to grab and just kind of move it back. Let's also press S to scale, and I'm going to scale this up. We're just going to stick it there, kind of right down there, and we will bring it over on the x-axis. Hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, and we can see how that's looking. So there we go. There is the procedural orange material, and it is just on this icosphere. All right, so now we're going to be creating the orange slice. So I'm first going to model it, and then we will apply the materials. So again, I'm going to press Shift S, hold down the Shift and S button. I'm going to go to the cursor to world origin and let go of the Shift and S button. So I'm now going to press Shift A. Let's go here to mesh, and I am going to add a circle. And then I'll press the period on the numpad, and that's going to zoom me into the circle. And you can't see it right now. That's because I need to press G to grab, and then I need to hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis. We're going to bring it way up, bring it up here, and kind of zoom in. And I'll press the tab key to go into edit mode, and then I want to fill a face here. So I'm just going to press the F key, and that is going to fill a face there in that circle. And then I want to give it some thickness, so I'm going to press E. E is going to extrude that, and I'm just going to bring it up and place it there. And then I'm going to press the tab key to go back into object mode. All right, now I want to add a bevel on the side, so let's go right over here to the modifier properties, and then I'm going to click on add modifier, and I'm going to go right here, and we're going to add the bevel modifier. So then on the segments here, I'm going to turn the segments up to just like a 3, and then on this amount here, I'm going to drag this down, and I'll hold down the shift key as I drag this to make my movements more sensitive, and I'm just going to make that really small, just like that. And then I also also want to add a subdivision surface, so I'm going to click on add modifier, and let's go to generate, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface just to smooth that out and give it more detail. And then also using the object context menu, we can shade this object smooth. All right, and then I think I just want this to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to press the tab key again to go into edit mode, and I'm going to double tap the A key to select everything, and I'll press S to scale. I'm going to hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis, just kind of bring that up and then place it right there. And then I can press tab to go back into object mode. So that is pretty much it for the orange slice. So I'm now going to be adding the materials. So we're first going to be adding the procedural orange skin. It's the same material that we added to this orange. So let's click on this object. We're going to go right over here to the material properties. Let's click on this drop down right here. And then I'm going to add the procedural orange peel. All right. And then to preview the material, I can hold down the Z button, go over to the material preview and let go. And this way we can preview the material in real time and just see how it's looking. So that's looking pretty good. So I now want to create the orange texture, which is on the top here, but then the orange peel will be on the sides. So let's press tab to go into edit mode. And then I'm actually going to press 3 on the top of my keyboard, or you can also click right here to go to the face select. And I'm going to select the top face, navigate down here, and I'll hold down the shift key and select the bottom face. So I'm now going to click on the plus icon right here, and this is going to create a new material in the material slots. And let's click on new, and then I can just rename this orange. And then with these faces still selected, I can click on the assign button, and that's going to assign the orange to those faces. And then I can press tab to go back to object mode. So you can see it is white, so we need to set up the material and add the texture. So to do that, let's hop over here to the shading workspace. And I'll press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it, and I'll hold down the Z button, go to the material preview, because it's a lot easier to see in the material preview. And actually something else that we can do is we can go into the local view. So on the numpad, you can hit that /, hit the /, and that's going to go into local view, so you can only see this object. It's totally optional. You don't need to do that if you don't want to, but just to eliminate the other objects for now, I can just hit the / on the numpad and go into the local view. So we're just going to preview this object. All right, so now I want to add in the texture. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for an image texture. Let's click on the image texture, and I'm just going to drop it down here. And then let's take the color, and we're going to plug the color into the base color. And then we need to open up the texture, so let's click on the open button. All right, so then as I talked about at the beginning of the tutorial series, I'm going to be using this orange texture here, and this is a free image from pixabay.com, so the link's in the description if you'd like to download it. So I just downloaded the highest resolution that they have on Pixabay of this image. So I'm going to select it, and then I can click on open image. All right, so I've loaded that in, but I need to UV unwrap the object because we actually need to tell the texture how it's going to be placed on the object. So what I'm going to do is press the tab key again to go back into edit mode, and then just make sure these are both selected. So select the top face, hold down the shift key, and select the bottom face. So I'm now going to press 7 on the numpad, and that's going to take me to the top view. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press U, and then I'm going to go right down here, and I'm going to unwrap this project from view. So I'm going to do the project from view, and that's going to UV unwrap it from our view. So it's going to UV unwrap it straight down. And then I need to edit the UV editing. So to do that, let's click right over here on the UV editing workspace. And I'm going to zoom in here, and then I will press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it. So here we have the UV editing. So we just need to align this up with the orange peel. So I'm going to press the A key to select everything, and I'll press G to grab, and I'm going to bring this over here, and then I can press S, and we're going to scale that up. Now you can see that the orange texture is a little bit lumpy on the sides, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button right here, and that is going to turn on the proportional editing. So I can now just select a vertex, and then I can press G to grab, and then I need to scroll my mouse wheel, and that is going to change the size of this, and I'm just going to move it over, place it there, and then I can select another vertex, press G to grab, and just kind of stick it there. And then select another one, press G to grab, and I'm just going to make this fit the orange. So you don't have to get it exact, but I do just want to fit the orange a little bit better because I do want to be able to see that little orange bit kind of there on the sides. So G to grab, move that over, and move this over as well. And then also you can scale the proportional editing by using your scroll wheel. So put that there. We're going to bring this one over here and just kind of stick that right over there. And that looks really good from both the top and the bottom view. Now, right now, this is just an image texture just plugged into the material. And so what I want to do is edit the material a little bit to make it look more like an actual orange material. So I'm going to click right back over here to the shading tab. As you can see right now, it's actually pretty simple. We just have this texture going into the base color. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view just so that we can preview what that's looking like. So you can see it's very flat and it doesn't look very realistic. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to mix this shader with a transparent shader, because right here where the actual orange is, I want that to be just slightly transparent. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the transparent BSDF shader. Let's drop this here. I'm also going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a mix shader. Let's add the mix shader and drop it right here. And I'm going to add the principled shader into the bottom one, and then I'm going to add the transparent into the top one. So now we are mixing them both together, but we're just evenly blending in between them. And I don't just want to evenly blend between them. I want some parts to be more transparent than others. And then like kind of right in here where that white area is, I don't want that to be transparent. So I'm going to use the texture to create a mask to actually tell it where it's going to be transparent and where it's going to be the principled. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A, and let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a color ramp, and let's click on the color ramp, just drop it right here, just put it above the transparent, and then I'm going to take the color and I'm going to plug that into the factor. And then I'm going to take this color and we're going to put this into the factor of the mix shader. So I'm now going to Control Shift and select the color ramp. That is using the feature from the Node Wrangler add-on, and we can preview the color ramp. So we now just need to create the mask. So I don't want it to be very transparent. I just want it to be a little bit transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this black tab right here and then click on this color, and I'm going to make this much brighter. And if you want to use the exact same color that I'm using for this, then you can go to the hex and you can put in a hex value of BF, BF, BF. So that is the color that I'll be using. So you can see that most of it is white, and so that is going to tell it to mostly use the bottom one, but then a little bit of it is a bit darker, and so that is going to use the transparent. So let's just Control Shift and select the mix shader to preview it. And if I kind of go over here and kind of move over to the sun, move over to where the sunlight is, you can see it is transparent just a little bit right there, but it's not very transparent. Now the transparent color is just this plain white color, and I don't want it to be just the plain white color. I want it to be kind of a yellowish color. So I'm going to click on this white color right here on the transparent, and I'm going to make it kind of a yellowish color because I want there to be yellow light going through. And if you'd like to use the exact same color that I'm using, you can go over to the hex and you can punch in a hex value of FFCA35. So now if you kind of bring that over to where there's that sun there, you can see there is yellow light coming through. Now I also want to give a little bit of subsurface scattering to allow a little bit of light to come through. So I'm going to take the subsurface value right here, and I'm going to turn this up to a 0.4. So a 0.4, and that is going to add subsurface scattering, and it helps to make it look a lot more like food and makes it a bit softer and allows light to go through. Now if I make the principled shader bigger, you can see when the light is going through it, it's kind of just bright, and I don't really want it to be that color. I want to click on this white color right here, and I want to make it kind of a yellowy orangish color so that there's going to be orange light going through. So I'm going to make the subsurface color kind of an orangey bright color. And again, if you want to use the same exact color that I'm using, then you can go to the hex value and you can punch in E76700. And now you can see that the light going through is much more orange and red. And then I also want this orange to be more shiny. So let's take the roughness value and I'm going to turn that down to like a 0.2. Now you can see that it's not very bumpy, it's very shiny, and so I want to give it some bump. So let's drag the orange texture out, and then what I'm going to do is take this color and we're going to drag the color into the normal to give it some bump. Now we need to convert this to normal data, so I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to go to the search here and I'm going to search for the bump node. Let's click on the bump node and I'm going to drop it right in here. And then I want to put the color into the height value. So now you can see that it's converting this orange texture into normal data, and so that can work with the normal, and so now it looks all bumpy. Now I don't want it to be bumpy all over the place because that just looks kind of rough and it doesn't actually look very realistic. We're basically just using this to kind of make a fake bump, but this isn't actually a proper bump map. This is just the color map. So what I can do to kind of fix this is I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search here and I'm going to search for a color ramp node. Let's click on the color ramp and I'm just going to drop it right here. So then I can Control Shift and select the color ramp to preview it. So now what I want to do is I want to take the black tab and I'm going to drag this out farther. And when I drag it out farther, it's going to be more contrasty. So we're going to bring these together. And also I do want to drag the white tab out a little bit just to make the white parts a little bit brighter. So now if I Control Shift and select the bump, you can see that some parts are more smooth, like right there it's pretty smooth, but then it's more bumpy kind of there, right there where those white parts are, and also in the middle. So I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview the final thing. And you can see that looks much more realistic. So it's kind of rough right there in the center, but then it's more smooth where the actual fruit is. Now it's still really bumpy and it looks very rough, and so I want to make it less bumpy. So let's take the strength value right here and I'm going to turn this down to like a 0.3. So just turn it down to like a 0.3 and now it's less bumpy. Now I also want to give this material just a little bit of random noisy bump all over the place. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here and I'm going to search for a noise texture. Let's drop the noise texture right down here. And then with the noise texture selected, I'm going to press Control T, and that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping node. That's another feature from the Node Wrangler. Now I don't need the mapping, so I'm going to click on the mapping and press X to delete it. And then also I'm going to take the object and let's plug the object into the vector. And the object coordinates will help to place the noise texture on the object more evenly. And then I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. Now on the noise texture, I'm going to turn the scale up to like a 10. 10 is better. And then I also want to add a lot of detail. So let's take the detail right here and I'm going to turn it all the way up to the max, which is 15. And then I want to add this in to the normal. So I'm going to click on this bump node and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it. We're going to duplicate the bump node and I'm going to stick it right there. So now the normal can go through the normal, but we now have this extra height value that we can add data into. So let's take the factor. We're going to plug the factor into the height value of this bump. So I can Control Shift and select this bump and you can see now we have a bunch of noise all over the place. Now that is a bit too strong. So on the strength value, I'm just going to turn the strength value down to like a 0.1 so it's less strong. Now you can see if you zoom in there, there's just a little bit of noise all over the place. So then I can Control Shift and select the mix shader to preview the final material. And there we go. It looks very fruity and it looks like it has a lot of juice inside it and it looks very organic. So let's press Control S to save, and then I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back to the material preview, and I'll just wait for that to load up. And actually I'm going to go out of local mode. You can see we're still in the local view. So I'm going to hit the / on the numpad, and that way we're going to preview everything else. So there we go. We now have a nice realistic orange slice. So I'm now going to go back over here to the layout, and then what I'm going to do is compare the scale. So I'm going to press G to grab and just kind of move this down here, just bring it down, and you can see it's a bit small. So I'm going to press S to scale, and I'm going to scale this up, and I'm just going to compare it with this orange so that the size is consistent. And I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger than this orange, just about that big, so that all the oranges in the scene are a consistent size. So I'm now going to press G to grab. I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to stick this orange peel right here. So you can press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it, and I'm just going to bring it down, just kind of stick it down there on the piece of wood. And then also you can press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view. Let's see how that's looking. I think it is just a slightly too big, so I'll press S to scale and I'll scale that down a little bit. That looks a little bit better. And then I also want to duplicate this orange slice and put one more kind of on top. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then R to rotate, and G to grab. And I'm just going to stick this one right there, kind of on top of the other one. So I'll move this over, just kind of stick it right there, maybe bring it down a little. All right, so that's pretty good, and make sure it looks good from the camera's perspective because the camera is where we're going to be rendering from. And then I want to make a few more orange slices. So I'm going to click on this orange slice and I want to put one back here. And then I also want to put one right here kind of on the side of the cup. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. And then what I want to do is just bring it over, but I don't want to bring it up and down. So I can press Shift Z. So when you press Shift Z, that is going to move it on the X-axis and the Y-axis, but it's not going to move it on the Z-axis. And I can just bring it right there and just place it there. All right, and then I'm going to zoom in, and I think I'll maybe bring it forward a little bit. And if you need to, you can bring it down or up. So I'm just going to place it right there. All right, that's really good. So I'm now just going to select this and we're going to duplicate it one more time. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's bring it up here, kind of bring it over, and I can press the 0 on the numpad to go back to the camera view. And then I want to press R to rotate, and I will hit X to rotate it on the X axis, and I can type in 9, 0 and enter to rotate it over by 90 degrees. And then I can also press G to grab, and I'm going to stick it right there. And then I'm going to hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view and see how that's looking in the rendered view. All right, that's pretty good. I do want to have the orange peel just facing the sun a little bit more, just so that it gets some more of the sunlight. So I'm going to press R to rotate. And then let's hit Z to rotate it on the Z axis. And I'm just going to rotate it over a little bit. Actually, I want to rotate it the other way where the sun is. And you can see now it's just getting a little bit of sunlight. And that looks a lot better. So it's just getting a little bit of sunlight. I can press Control B and then drag a box around there, and then it's only going to render what you can see in there. And you can see there's all this light kind of reflecting off the orange, and I think that looks very nice and realistic. All right, that's pretty good. So let's press Control B again, and I'm going to drag a box around the entire thing so I can preview that. All right, so this scene is really coming together. Let's press Control S again to save. So because we pretty much have everything in the scene, I now just want to move the camera in a little bit because we actually know what's in the scene. So I'm going to select the camera, and then I can press G to grab, kind of bring it up. Let's also hold down the Z button, go into the material preview so it's a bit faster. And then I'm going to double tap the Z key, and that'll bring it in and out. And I'm going to bring it in, just bring it in a bit and kind of bring it up a little bit. So I'm just going to center the drink right in there so there's not really any extra space. All right, just like that. That is really good. Now I also want to duplicate the straw and put one of the straws right down there. So I'm going to click on the straw and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Just stick it there. And then what I want to do is press Alt R, and Alt R is going to clear the rotation of the straw. So now it's rotated up and down. So I can now press R to rotate, and then I can hit X to rotate it on the X axis. And I want to type in 9, 0 and enter to rotate that over. And then I can also press the period on the numpad to zoom into it. So I can now press G to grab, and G to grab. We're going to bring this right down there. Gonna stick it right down there on the wood piece. Then I can press R to rotate. Let's rotate it on the Z axis, and I'm going to rotate that over. And I'm going to press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and I'm just going to rotate this over and bring it over a little bit and just kind of stick it right there. And if you wanted to, you could duplicate the straw color and you could make it a separate color. I'm just going to leave it as pink, but you could change the color if you want to. All right, I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back into the rendered view. And if you look at the background, you can see the background isn't really the best, and I don't really like that for the background. I instead want to add some clouds and some sky. So what I'm going to do is go right back over here to the shading tab. I'll press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and then I can hold down the Z button and go into the rendered view. So I now want to actually change what we can see in the background. So I'm going to click right here on object, and I'm going to instead change this to world. And this way we can preview the world nodes. So I want this HDRI to control the lighting because I really like how the lighting looks, but I actually want to be able to see a different HDRI. So what I'm going to do is press B for the box select. I'm going to box select all these nodes, and then I'm going to press Shift D. Shift D will duplicate it, and I'm going to bring it down. So now we have 2 of these HDRIs. So I now want to click on this file icon to change the HDRI. And link is in the description if you want to download the other HDRI. So the other one I'm going to be downloading is the Delta 2, and this is a 4K HDRI. Now you could just download the 1K HDRI if you want the file size to be smaller, but because I'm going to be previewing this in the background, I want it to be a little bit higher quality, so I'm going to download the 4K version. So again, links in the description if you'd like to download this one. So I'm going to click on it, and then I will click on Open Image. All right, so now if I Control Shift and select this background, you can preview it in the background, but you can see the lighting doesn't look quite as nice. So if I Control Shift and select this background, I want this one to be the lighting, but then this one to be the background. And then we will rotate this HDRI and put the sky and the clouds in the background. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a mix shader. Let's click on the mix shader, and I'm going to drop it right here. And then I'm going to take this background, and let's put this one into the bottom one, and then this one is going to go into the top one. And then right here on this bottom background, I want it to be a bit brighter. So I'm going to take the strength, and I'm just going to change that to like a 2.5. A 2.5 so it's a bit brighter. Now right now this factor value is just evenly blending in between the two, but I want this HDRI to actually light the scene, but then I want to see this HDRI. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the light path node. Let's add the light path node right there. And then I want to take the is camera ray and I want to put this into the factor. So now you can see that we are previewing the bottom HDRI, but the scene is actually being lit by the top HDRI. So that is a really cool feature of this light path node. We can plug the is camera ray into the factor. Now that background doesn't really look any better, and so I want to rotate this HDRI so that I can see the clouds in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the rotation here of this bottom mapping, and on the X value, I'm going to change this to just like a 10, change that to a 10, and then right here on this rotation Z, I'm going to change this one to 110. And that way now you can see that the sky is in the background. And why I'm using these values is because I already practiced this tutorial. I created it a few different times, and so I already found these values that look pretty good. But what you can do is you can just rotate this Z value, and you can see it's going to rotate the sky. So just rotate that around until you get it to somewhere where you like with the sky background. And then why I'm rotating the X rotation is because I don't want to be able to see any of the trees or anything like that down there. So I'm rotating the X rotation, and that's going to rotate the sky down so I can see more of the clouds. So there we go. Now the sky is in the background, and that looks really nice. So it kind of looks like we have this drink at the beach. Now I also want to make this HDRI just a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the hue saturation node. Let's drop the hue saturation node right after the Delta 2 HDRI, and then I can change the saturation value. So I'm just going to click on the arrow to turn the saturation up, and I'm just going to turn the saturation up to a 1.3, and now you can see the background is a bit more saturated and the colors are popping out more, and that looks nicer. All right, so we are almost finished with this 3D scene. I'm just going to render this out, and then we'll do a little bit of compositing. So I'm going to click right up here to go to the render properties, and then I'm going to open up the sampling. Now, if you turn the samples up, you can see right here there is the render samples, there's viewport, and that's what you're going to preview in the viewport, but then there is render samples. So if you turn the samples up, the final render is going to be nicer, but it will also take longer to render. So if it's taking way too long to render, you could turn the sampling down. I'm going to turn my samples up to like 250. I know that might be a little bit high and it might take a while to render, but there's so much glass and there's all these textures in here, and there's the little water droplets, and there's all the ice and everything. So I do think this scene needs a little bit more samples. So I'm going to turn this up to 250. You could turn it up even more if you want to make it really, really nice. I think 250 is okay. And then in Blender's compositor, we're going to be adding the denoise node to denoise the image and make it nice and smooth. And then also you can go right here to the output properties and you can change the resolution. So if you make the resolution smaller, it's going to render faster. So you could just change the resolution to like 1080 by 1080. I'm going to keep this at 2560 by 2560 because I do want this to be a pretty high quality image. But again, if it's taking too long to render, you could turn the resolution down. So before I render anything, I always like to press Ctrl S to save, just to save the Blender file, just in case it crashes. And then I'm going to press F12 to render, or you can also click on render and then click on render image. All right, and the render finished. Now, if I zoom in here, you can see there's a lot of noise. So what I'm going to do is use the denoise node in Blender's compositor to smooth it out and make it look much nicer. So I'm going to click right here on the compositing tab, and then I can click on the use nodes button. And then let's also click and drag this down just so that we can hide the timeline because we don't need it. All right, so now I'm going to bring the render layers out and I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here and I'm going to search for the denoise node, and let's drop the denoise right there. And then I can Control Shift and select the denoise. That's using the feature from the node wrangler, and it's going to add the viewer node and click on the backdrop, make sure the backdrop is turned on, and it's going to denoise the image, and that looks much nicer. So if you press V, that's going to zoom the image out, and then if you press Alt V, that's going to zoom the image in. And then you can also hold down the Alt key and click with your middle mouse wheel, and that's going to move the backdrop around. So I'm just going to show you the effect of that. So if I click on the denoise, I can press the M key and that is going to hide it. And you can see there's all that noise there, especially right in there. There's a lot of noise. But then if I press M, that is going to unmute the node, and it'll just take a moment to denoise. And there we go. So you can see it denoises the image and makes it look much nicer. So that is it. That is the finished rendered image. Of course, if you wanted to, you could add a few more things, like do do a bit of color correction or add a vignette or do some other compositing, but I think this looks pretty nice. So I'm going to save this image now. So to save this image, I'm going to press F11, and that is going to take me over here to the image editor. And then I want to click on the render result, click right here, and I want to search for the viewer node, and I'm going to click on the viewer node, and that is going to preview the final composite. So then to save this image, let's click on image, and then I can click on save as. And I will just save this as final render, and I'll just save this as a PNG image, and I will just click on save as. And with that image saved out, this is going to finish it up for the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial series. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial series, and I hope you learned a lot from it. And if you post your render online somewhere, you can definitely let me know in the comments where I can find it, and I'll try to check it out. And as I said earlier in the tutorial series, if you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can also purchase the tutorial files on my Gumroad store, and you can also get the tutorial files on my Patreon page. And checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are great ways to help support the channel. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel here on YouTube, then you can check out the YouTube memberships. So if you click on that join button right down there next to the subscribe button, if you join my memberships, you'll be helping to support the channel each month, and you'll get some cool perks here on YouTube. But that's going to be it for this tutorial series. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you for watching.